Hello there, I'm Scott and you're watching Your Experience Guide for this dedicated Big Dipper video at Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
Hello, I'm Becca, and while Scott talks about all the factual stuff, I'm going to talk a bit more about some memories I've got of the Big Dipper, things with my family, things with PB as it were. Yeah, a bit more of the light-hearted side.
So let's get started with those facts about the Big Dipper then. The Big Dipper opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in August 1923. It was designed by John A. Miller, who was a famous wooden roller coaster designer who designed and built over 100 wooden roller coasters all over the world. He was helped by William Strickler, who did most of the building, along with no doubt some of these people that worked with him, but John A. Miller designed the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper was the first roller coaster in Europe and the UK especially to use up-stop wheels. Now, up-stop wheels are something that we're all very familiar with now on roller coasters. It's very rare that you'll go on a roller coaster that does not have up-stop wheels. But back in the 1920s when Big Dipper was built, it wasn't really a thing. You had side friction wooden roller coasters, which of course had the running wheels on the running rails, but it didn't have the up-stop wheels. But once up-stop wheels were designed and were starting to be used on wooden roller coasters that John A. Miller was building in America, and then of course Big Dipper, it meant that the creation of roller coasters could progress so much further than they ever had done before. They could go higher, they could go faster, could go steeper, they could have faster turns. There was a lot less concerns about derailing roller coasters once up-stop wheels became a thing basically. And of course, because of that, is why we see such great roller coaster designs these days, because without up-stop wheels, which, let's be honest, up-stop wheels would have been thought about and created eventually, but John A. Miller did it first. He put them on the Big Dipper, and that is how the Big Dipper was able to be how it is. In 1936, the Big Dipper was modified and extended by Charles Page. Now, the reason for this is because Blackpool Pleasure Beach had actually acquired more land, and that is the land that the Pleasure Beach used today, where rides like Steeplechase, the Big One, the Big Blue Hotel are all situated on Blackpool Pleasure Beach's land. But before this, the Big Dipper actually used to have a completely different layout after the third drop, because rather than continuing in a straight line like it does today, it actually turned off and went in the direction of where the Big One's lift hill and the Big One station is, and then turned back and made its way back to the starting point. But once Blackpool Pleasure Beach had bought more land, the Big Dipper was actually in the way of expanding in the way that Blackpool Pleasure Beach wanted to do. So it seemed like a good time to change the Big Dipper. But also, according to Riding on Rainbows, which is a very good book about Blackpool Pleasure Beach, it was actually considered that the Big Dipper was quite boring once the Grand National and roller coaster had opened. So with that in mind, Blackpool Pleasure Beach then took the decision to modify the Big Dipper to, one, make it more exciting, but two, make it more efficient in terms of the space that it was taking up. So Big Dipper was extended and modified to how we see it today, and of course Blackpool Pleasure Beach have built all around it ever since, which takes me on to a good point that Becca's going to talk about in terms of how Big Dipper is at the heart of Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
Yes, so in my opinion, the Big Dipper is the heart of the Pleasure Beach, and that's for a couple of different reasons. For a start, the Big Dipper has been there forever. Well, 100 years, to be precise. But the route of the Big Dipper does cover, obviously not all of the Pleasure Beach, but quite a lengthy area of the Pleasure Beach. But with that, there's so much that's been built around the Big Dipper. You know, even just from a visual point of view, as you walk up the ramp past the river caves, what you've got in front of you is that Big Dipper kind of tower with the onion on top, or whatever we're wanting to call it. And that is, you know, one of the sights that everyone remembers about the Pleasure Beach. And back in, you know, 30s, 50s, 60s, it's even written that, you know, Big Dipper was one of those things on the skyline that you remembered. So if you think about how most people will see the Big One these days, you know, you get the train in, you're not going to miss where the Big One is. Big Dipper used to play that role and it's just been overshadowed by things being bigger than it over time, but it is still ingrained in everything. So you've got the fact that obviously where the walkway comes to, it's Big Dipper. Then you've got a space, which is now in Fusion. You've got the big one that interacts with it. You've got steeplechase. You know, you've got so much that goes round the Big Dipper. You've even got the big blue curves around it. It's just, it's in there and everything. There's so many decisions that have to be made to work with the Big Dipper being there. And it's the kind of thing, if you just magically took the Big Dipper out, you'd forever see where it was, because the Pleasure Beach has grown around it. It has been the heart of the Pleasure Beach. Nothing else has really had that kind of impact on, you know, building so many other things around it. I mean, partly it's because of the out and back design. Obviously, if you think about the Grand National, it's just in its little box that's hidden away now by Valhalla, but even still, it's just wherever you are in the park, on that side of the park anyway, you can see it. When you're on so many other rides, you can see it. When you're on the Big Dipper, I mean, the first thing you're going to kind of interact with is the revolution as you're going up the lift hill. And then as you go down the first drop, you're definitely going to notice Infusion. Everywhere you are, you're going to notice the big one. You know, you get round to the turnaround and steeplechase is there. You're going to see roller coaster. You're going to see everything around you. And it's just, it really ties everything in together, the Big Dipper. It's like a link between everything. And I really don't think it gets enough appreciation for that and how ingrained it is in the Pleasure Beach.
If you've been on the Big Dipper at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, or you've ever watched a POV of the Big Dipper at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, you'll have noticed that it actually has two lift hills. Now, it has two lift hills, but the chain is the same for both of those lift hills, which is a really unique design. And even though it is the same chain, it actually pulls in a different direction depending on where the train is. So when it first carries the train up to a higher point, the train is taken in the direction towards the south part of the Pleasure Beach. So if you are riding Big Dipper at this point, you will be facing the big one, you'll be looking at Icon, you'll basically be facing the Big Blue Hotel. And then once it comes off the chain, it slowly coasts its way round to the main lift hill, where the train is pulled up in a different direction, facing towards Blackpool Tower. When riding the Big Dipper and being pulled up one of those lift hills, you will hear a click, click, click sound. That is the anti-rollbacks in action, basically stopping the Big Dipper train from rolling back. So when, of course, the train is being pulled up and the chain is in motion, the train is being lifted to a higher height. The click, click, click noise that you'll hear when going up the Big Dipper is basically the chain dog underneath the train just clicking off of those anti-rollbacks as the train's going up. But if the train is to stop, that's when you'll feel a gradual little movement where the train will go back a little bit and it'll basically fall to the next anti-rollback. And then, I'm not a mechanic, so I'm not going to explain this very well, but basically the chain dog on the train will connect with the anti-rollback and it will stop the train from rolling all the way back down. I am not a mechanically minded person, so I've probably described that terribly, but that is probably the best way I can describe it. So if you are ever riding the Big Dipper and the train does come to a stop on the lift hill, you will probably have noticed that it does roll back a tiny little bit until it catches on to the anti-rollback and stops. Big Dipper is mostly manually operated. There is levers in the control box where the ride attendant will be, and they will control the braking as the train comes into the station. However, there is a computerized element of Big Dipper with sensors on the lift hill and half away around the ride. Now, the reason for this is because it's basically a block zone, but an old school block zone really, without the use of computers fully on the ride, because it's not controlled in the same way of the Grand National, which has got a fully computerized system. There is still manually operated procedures to Big Dipper, such as the braking, taking the brakes off and so on. But to sort of explain how the sensors work on Big Dipper, when Big Dipper's on two trains, when your train is dispatched from the station and you get to the second tall lift hill, once your train's going up there, it will get to a certain point where it might actually stop. Now, the reason it might stop is because the other train that is going around the track has not reached the offload point or is still in the offload point by the time that your train reaches a certain point of the lift hill. If that was to happen, the train on the lift hill will stop and it will not move until the train in the station has cleared the offload and gone into the onload section of the station, which is then safe for the train out on the track to continue. So if you are ever on Big Dipper and your train stops on the lift hill, it's likely because the other train has not yet cleared the offload sensors or block zone in the station. Of course, sometimes you will see local sort of newspapers picking up on a roller coaster being stopped on a lift hill. There's usually a good reason for it, and it's not that the ride's actually broke down. It's usually a good sign that the ride is actually working as it's designed to do so.
Okay, so the first memory I'm going to share with you is about my first experience of the Big Dipper. My dad has always loved the Pleasure Beach and roller coasters, and he's to blame for me getting into it. But basically, he used to bribe me onto the rides with some money, and I just remember us going on it for the first time, and I'm pretty sure I was clinging to him the whole way round, but I was really loving it, but I didn't want to let on too much because might give me some more to do it a second time. And I can't remember if he did or not, but I do remember kind of laying it on a bit thick about, oh, I didn't like that. I did, definitely did. But yeah, that was quite fun because I still remember going up the lift hill and kind of how big is the Big Dipper, because obviously when you get round to going round the tower or the Onion and you could just kind of see everything, then you do get a really good view up there, and it feels a lot higher than it is, I think, from up there, especially when you're quite small, because I wouldn't have been big at all, obviously tall enough for it, but I must have only just been tall enough for it. So yeah, being bribed onto the Big Dipper. So another memory I've got of the Big Dipper is my dad tricking my grandma onto the Big Dipper. Now, that wouldn't be as possible these days because, well, for a start, roller coaster is very orange, and that's what my grandma thought she was going to be going on to. But we've also lost the staircase down from the top of the ramp down into roller coaster, because halfway down that staircase you used to have a cut through straight through to Big Dipper. So it was quite easy to kind of mislead someone down the wrong way. But yeah, my grandma agreed. She was going to go on roller coaster. It didn't look too bad. She definitely wasn't doing anything bigger. She definitely wasn't doing the Big Dipper. And so down the stairs they went, under the steps they went, and across the Big Dipper. And it was a little bit too late by the time my grandma had kind of clocked on to what was happening. And there were quite a few crosswords had from my grandma to my dad. And I know my grandma still remembers that as well, and there's still some crosswords said anytime it gets brought up. And I do miss that cut through in those stairs. Now you have to go all the way down and all the way around, and it's just not like it used to be. But yeah, that will always stick with me.
50 years after the Big Dipper opened in 1973, Big Dipper was actually still one of the highest earning rides and one of the most popular rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, up there with rides like the Grand National and like Roller Coaster, earning lots of money for the park. Because of course, back in those days, there was no wristbands, there was no e-tickets, there was no season passes. If you wanted to go on Big Dipper and you wanted to ride it once, twice, 3 times, maybe 10 times, you had to pay to go on it every time. And even though, even back then, Pleasure Beach was accused of being too expensive, lots of people were paying to ride rides like the Big Dipper. So 50 years on from it opening, just like now, 100 years on, it is still a very popular roller coaster. And that was shown especially in 1975 when the Big Dipper had a major fire. There is videos on YouTube of that fire. And even though it had that fire and there was some pretty serious damage caused to Big Dipper's station and parts of the ride, Blackpool Pleasure Beach refurbed it and they got it back open, and of course it is still open to the modern day, where it is an extremely popular roller coaster, and that is why it's been able to get to 100 years of operation. Just before that fire in 1975, Blackpool Pleasure Beach had actually applied to have Big Dipper made tax exempt because they claimed that Big Dipper was a transportation device similar to a train or similar to a bus. Of course, they never got that through and it was never approved. But I think it's quite funny that Blackpool Pleasure Beach actually tried to make Big Dipper tax exempt from VAT to actually make it cheaper for people to go on and to remove the taxing from it. The Big Dipper has been used as a world record attempting roller coaster on several occasions by Richard Rodriguez, first in the 70s and then twice in the 90s, and as well in 2007. Richard Rodriguez, an American roller coaster enthusiast, has had several record attempts on the Big Dipper. In 1998, he went on the Big Dipper for over 40 consecutive days and over 1,000 hours to break the record of how long somebody would ride a roller coaster for consecutively. He's done it many a time since. He's done it a couple of times on the big one since then. But in 2007, he did a joint sort of record attempt to cross two coasters. In the daytime, he was on the big one, and in the evenings, he was on Big Dipper. I will put a link in the description to some of the articles and the video reports about Richard Rodriguez lapping the Big Dipper. There's some really good shots on YouTube of him literally sleeping on the Big Dipper as it's going round, or he's sat there with a pillow whilst he's sat like this with his feet up. There's just so many great shots of the 90s, from the 90s, of Richard Rodriguez attempting his world record attempts on Big Dipper. And of course, if you've ever been on the Big Dipper, you'll have seen in the station there is, of course, a plaque which honours his world record attempts on the Big Dipper.
We were having an ERT on the Big Dipper. Always great, especially at the end of the day. It was nearly time to go and kind of loiter outside the Big Dipper, but I thought, you know what, we'll go on the Revolution. And go on the Revolution we did, and then it stopped at the far side. And from up there we could see everyone congregating down at the front of the Big Dipper. And we're thinking, we're all going to miss this. All of the organisers are on the Revolution and it's not going anywhere. We're waving, we're shouting, you know, Mark, we're up here, we're stuck. And they were just none the wiser at all. Because even though it feels quite close, there is quite a distance. It's not the easiest thing to shout across there. But then one of the ride-ops that was going to be doing the ERT with us, he popped up on the Revolution and said, well, it's not starting until I get there either. So that was really funny. We got down and the ERT went on. That was brilliant. One of the things that some people that did that ERT might remember is it was getting quite dark by this point as well, towards the end of the ERT. Going along, we'd had many rides and we were coming up towards the Big Blue, and then as we all just kind of hit that dip before the turnaround, a few of us looked up and just saw someone stood by the window fully open, you know, curtains fully open and everything else open because they didn't have anything on at all, and they just stood watching. And then so many people on the train just burst out laughing, thinking, does he know we can see him? I mean, obviously he knows he can see us, but does he think we're going too fast to see him? And then there was a lot of laughter and chatting when we all got back to the station. Then of course we all went on again to see if he was still stood there, but no, curtains were closed and he was long gone. I think a lot of the giggling on our way around the turnaround might have alerted him to the fact that, oh, did they see me? Are they laughing at me? And then he disappeared. So that was funny.
One last technical thing to talk about with Big Dipper, and it kind of goes back to the anti-rollback subject. When you're riding round on Big Dipper, you may sometimes notice on some of the hills towards halfway around the ride or towards the end of the ride, there will be like a couple of anti-rollbacks at the top or on the crest of the hills. And as the train goes over them, they'll make this sound. Those anti-rollbacks are placed around Big Dipper as basically a precaution in case the train loses speed and does actually roll back when it's going round. So the anti-rollbacks would stop the train from rolling all the way to the bottom of the hill, and then it would mean that the staff could get to it, try and push it back round or push it back into a position where the ride could actually make it all the way back around. I've seen this done a couple of times when it's been tested. It's never happened, as far as I'm concerned, with people on the ride. Well, I say never, it's certainly not happened when I've been at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. However, I think it's the kind of thing that happens more during testing rather than when people are on the ride, because when there's people on the ride, it runs at a good speed. It's a pretty raucous roller coaster. It's packed with airtime, especially in the rain. If it's ever got a moist rail, it is a very, very wild wooden roller coaster experience, which is exactly what it was designed to do and still does 100 years later. In terms of Big Dipper memories, I remember in 2013 the Big Dipper 90th anniversary party. It was a very good event that Blackpool Pleasure Beach put on. It was like a 3-hour event where it was basically a Big Dipper ERT. Infusion was also running, but there was the opportunity to get alcohol. There was food put on by the Pleasure Beach. There was specialised merchandise put on by Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I still have that t-shirt that I bought that night somewhere. But my memory from that is, even though it was August, it absolutely chucked it down all day and all evening. So Big Dipper had a moist rail, but also it was before all the sort of grip was put down in the Big Dipper station. So it was literally so slippy in that station. But the roller coaster enthusiasts there, me, Mike, and some very familiar people who are still going to Blackpool Pleasure Beach today, we were like, we don't care about the rain. We're just going to lap Big Dipper all night. So we were absolutely soaked. We were all having to make sure we didn't slip over in the station, and it was just such a good night. And also, strangely enough, it'll be interesting to see if this happens this time around, there was a DJ in the Big Dipper station as well, all set up with his decks, playing loud music. It was a really special occasion to mark the 90th anniversary of Big Dipper. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Blackpool Pleasure Beach do with their 100th Big Dipper party, which is tomorrow. Another memory of mine with Big Dipper is actually sticking with 2013 again, but going back a little bit earlier that year. It was actually opening weekend where we'd got a Big Dipper exclusive ride time session booked for the evening of opening day. And we'd got a phone call the day before saying, look, I'm really sorry, Big Dipper's not going to be open for opening day. You're going to have to pick another ride for your ERT. I was like, right, okay, fair enough. We'll go with either the Grand National or the big one. Group of us arrived in Blackpool the day before opening after having this phone call, thinking, oh, it's a shame we're not going to get on Big Dipper this weekend. Turn up in Blackpool and see Big Dipper testing, like, oh, maybe there is a chance we'll get on it then. And then all day that Friday before opening, it was testing and testing and testing. And it's like, yeah, we're still not going to get on it. They're probably going to open it on the Sunday or maybe the following week. About 7, 8 o'clock that night, we all decided, we were all a lot younger, all in our early 20s. It was like, yeah, we'll go out for the night. Who cares if we're a little bit hungover for opening day? And as we're walking back to Blackpool Pleasure Beach at about 10 o'clock at night, Big Dipper was still testing. And it was like, maybe we will get on it tomorrow. And as it happened on that Saturday, on that opening day at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, after originally finding out that Big Dipper wasn't going to open that day at all and we were going to have to pick another ride for the ERT, Big Dipper was the first roller coaster that opened that day. So it was like, yeah, that's good. We're going to get our ERT. And as it happened, the ERT that evening on Big Dipper is probably one of the best ERT sessions we've ever had. It was completely pitch black around Pleasure Beach. All the lights were off. Pretty much all it had on was the train lights were on. The Onion was lit up and that was it. And there was some very, very dark rides on the Big Dipper. And it was an incredible ERT session and one that I'll always sort of remember from our time of being Club Pleasure Beach.
So the legacy of the Big Dipper, for me, I think it's there to stay, and it's faced so many things. Obviously the Grand National came round, that had to be redone to make it last for a new growing appetite of thrill seeking, really. And obviously since that it's lived up to that. The fact that there's so much built around it, the fact that it's had fires, I mean, it's been flooded before the sea defences. Whatever's come across to the Big Dipper, be it you know, problems with the trains, problems with fires, all the different changes that have happened around it, you know, rides coming, going, changing, things, everything around it has changed, but the Big Dipper has stayed. And even though it's had rough patches before bits of work have been done, it's remained such a high quality ride, and it's brilliant. I mean, especially at night time. It's such a good ride when it's been running all day and it's just going for it. And I think it's just lasted 100 years so well that I don't think you could ever find a proper excuse to get rid of it. I just think it should always remain the heart of the pleasure beach. I mean, if they've got it to 100 years, that, you know, there's no stopping it, especially with everything it's been through. It's, you know, it's made of tough stuff and it's there to stay.
That's all from me and Becca about the Big Dipper at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If we could get another video to somewhere between 200 and 300 likes, that would be massively appreciated. And also, please do let us know about your Big Dipper memories in the comment section below. Finally, before I go, the video upload schedule is changing on this channel. We are going to 4 uploads a week, starting from basically now. So from now on, there's going to be uploads on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. No more Tuesday uploads after this one. It will be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 4 uploads a week right through until November. And I'm pleased to say that there is quite a lot of Blackpool Pleasure Beach content coming in the next couple of days, focusing on the Big Dipper party, a couple of vlogs. There is a 10 o'clock close coming. So there's going to be a lot of Blackpool Pleasure Beach content over the next couple of days. But yet, there is now going to be more uploads on this channel for the next couple of months. Many thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.